All right, everybody. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another Saga episode here on Heart of a Volunteer Veterans Podcast. I'm your host, Chris, and our veteran co-host today is Army veteran Mike Humphreys. Stick around. Another amazing Saga episode is coming your way. Mike, welcome to the show, my friend. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me.
Man, we've been trying to catch up for a little while, and I'm glad we finally did, man. I'm glad we finally did.
Yeah, it took a little bit. Sorry I take so long getting back. I'm still developing my communication skills.
Well, no, you know what? Busy life, man. I mean, you're there in Portland. What's it looking like there?
You know, it's actually very nice today. I work a graveyard shift, so normally I'm not up in the middle of the day during this point of the week to see what the weather looks like. But right now it is beautiful, sunny, blue sky. Looks like we're transitioning straight into spring. Kind of skipped the winter this year, so it's looking nice here.
So you guys didn't get any snow at all, just not there in Portland?
No, not here. I've been here since 2017, and the past two winters, there was like a week or two of snow and ice at least, and then the rest of the time it just rains. And this year it was pretty much just mild and rainy every day for about 2 or 3 months, and we just skipped. Yeah, no ice, no snow. Now there's some on the mountains. You got Mount Hood and St. Helens in this area, which you got plenty of snow, above like 6,000 feet.
Right.
But down here in the river valley, Columbia River and Willamette and all that, it's Willamette, not Willamette. Anyways, no snow down here, no ice. So yeah, just very mild. A little bit of global warming in this part of the country, maybe this year in particular.
Right. Hey, so, I've never been to Portland, man. And for any veterans that haven't been to that area, I mean, you've been there since 2017. What's there to do there? What keeps you there in that area, would you say?
Man, it is I've been all over the country, and this is the Pacific Northwest is by far my favorite location so far. You've got, two things. You got the natural beauty in this area. You've got the Cascade Mountain Range that surrounds Portland. So right. You've got all your hiking and all that stuff. You got the forest around here, volcanoes and all that stuff. We're an hour from the ocean. And then Portland itself, it's a relatively small city. It's packed into the river valleys, but it's a major urban center. I mean, it's got everything that any major city you would expect to have on the West Coast. So right. You've got everything in terms of city life nearby, and then you've got all the hiking around you. So it's just a perfect combination as far as I'm concerned. And it's just nice to get up. You can just get up and go for a 5-minute drive and just see an amazing view pretty much anywhere you go most of the year. So
yeah, I did. I did see some great pictures that you took, man, just out and about. And then on some of the hikes that you went on, just a beautiful, beautiful area there. So,
oh yeah, it's awesome. And I'm more of a, as far as like mountains or ocean, I'm definitely more of a mountains person. So this area is right up my alley. And it's, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say also too, just where I'm at. It's not LA, but I'm in close proximity to a lot of the just industries and stuff, in the country, in this area. You've got a lot of employment opportunities around here.
Yeah,
that
definitely.
Aren't necessarily available where I'm from, which is North Mississippi. So I had to relocate.
What do you do there in Portland, man? You said you do the graveyard. What kind of work you got going on?
Yeah. Currently, what I'm doing is I am teaching English online to Chinese students, ESL, English Secondary Language Education. Yeah. So I do that online. My students are all Chinese kids between like the age of 5 and 13. And obviously their primetime school hours, late afternoon, evening, are my 4 a.m. So I go through the middle of the night running those classes 5 days a week. And that is my graveyard shift, which is an interesting job. I like it.
Well, yeah. Can you describe that? Is that like a regular semester, or do they run on, kind of a different kind of schedule than, what U.S. schools do?
It's through a private Chinese company. It's a private Chinese company, but it does follow the the education ministry guidelines out of the Chinese government. So it still falls into whatever their curriculum guidelines are over there. But it's just hour by hour classes, one student at a time. So it's kind of like a tutoring program, I guess you would say.
Okay.
And and so I just have a little list of students, and then the parents, choose to sign up with me or not. And I run it that way. And it's a very flexible system too, because I get to make a schedule on basically a week by week basis. So whereas I do have to work a graveyard shift, which has its drawbacks, I also have full flexibility as far as basically if I have 2 weeks notice, I can take any time off I want. So that's nice.
Yeah.
So
definitely.
It's got its advantages there too.
Now, what's going on now, man, is with the schools not in session over there in China. It's, with the coronavirus, is that affecting your work or anything?
Yeah, so for me, that had actually been a concern. I mean, outside of the obvious concern for the kids and stuff over there, I was wondering if that wouldn't affect my job because, it is kind of bringing a lot of China to a halt economically and a lot of U.S. Chinese trade and stuff. But it's actually, I don't think it's affecting this particular industry that much because the thing is that the kids are being kept at home right now. A lot of them have not left their apartments or houses since January as a precaution. The government's recommending that their parents keep them in. So they're pretty much staying at home, and all of their normal school in China has been their New Year's break has been extended through March, if not further. So they're doing all their classes at home anyways. And the Chinese government's doing this through tablets and TV and stuff. So my job fits straight into that. So it's actually not affecting the ESL thing right now. I've got plenty of students that are actually signing up right now, whereas they normally wouldn't because they can't do anything else. So yeah, it's not hurting their ability to get their education, which is good. They just can't leave. And from my interactions with them, it's really affecting that one particular province, Wuhan, and the province it's in the most. And the rest of China, it's not that big of a thing in the rest of China, like Beijing, where I have a lot of students. There haven't been that many cases in Beijing, but they have Beijing basically on lockdown to prevent it from spreading.
Right.
And you got all the students staying at home right now. So they are, taking the precautions, but it kind of seems like they're, basically sacrificing the city of Wuhan, for the sake of the rest of the country, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what it looks like right now.
You got to ask those questions. Like, what do you do? I mean,
yeah. How do you quarantine when that kind of thing happens? And it's a hard thing to figure out. And, they're having to figure that out now in the U.S. because I think there's only been like 20 cases in the U.S. so far. But I heard yesterday that they had a case in San Francisco, I believe, that it was a person who's got the infection who has no known contact with anybody internationally, nor have they traveled. So that's a sign that it is spreading in the U.S. They don't know where that came from. So it's kind of a question of, like they said, it's kind of more of a question of when it's going to spread rather than if it's going to spread. But, the thing is, too, people don't need to get hysterical. The media, they always sensationalize everything, including this. And this disease does not have a high mortality rate. If you get it, there's about a 1 in 100 chance it's going to kill you. Mm-hmm. So, but, still, you don't want anything like that going around. So they do need to do what they can as far as precautions go. I tell everybody, wash your hands, keep some hand sanitizer,
Yeah, that's what they're saying. Wash your hands real good. Just if
you see somebody coughing, don't go close to them. Simple precautions will keep that stuff away.
And the other thing I think is, if you're sick, if you know you may be sick, stay home.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Same thing with it's the same precautions you have with the flu. But people they just need to just keep basic common sense on it. But also remember, too, that, this stuff can be no joke sometimes. If you think back to the Spanish flu, that was just the flu, but it killed, I don't know how many millions of people because they just let it go everywhere. So
I listened to this podcast called Tides of History. And he does an episode, like 2 or 3 episodes back to back, where the plague was like in the middle of his story. It was like just ripping its way across Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It was deadly, man. And I would hate for something like that to happen. It's like, it's no joke.
Especially when they don't, when they didn't understand it back then, that made it, 1,000 times worse. And it's just something like this. It's the fact that, it's like I said, it's not so much the mortality rate, but just how infectious it is, and the fact that it can live on a surface for days outside of the human body.
Yeah.
So it's just a very hardy virus, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And it's going to take them a moment to come up with the vaccine. So,
right.
Yeah, they just got to keep an eye out.
Well,
and figure out how this is starting in the first place, of course, too. Hopefully they're building up their research on where this came from. I mean, I know what the theories are about the markets and everything, but yeah, there's hopefully China develops some better preventative measures in the future, to stave something like this off again.
I'd be interested in just what the vectors are. Because if you got folks that haven't traveled, a guy came out of his house, he's been there for a month playing Fortnite, and all of a sudden he's got coronavirus. What's the vector?
Yeah, that's exactly. And obviously what that is somebody has been to the U.S. from China or wherever, and they didn't track them. So there's people that are moving around they don't know of that have contracted it.
Right.
And but I also know too, I think it's got like a 24-day incubation period, so you can have it and not know you have it. It's just it's got all the worst hallmarks of something that's hard to contain. Yeah,
good point there. Yeah, man, well said, man. Well, hey, Mike, let's can we talk about your military time, man? The question I always ask every veteran that comes on is, did you have any family influence, or, was the military always on your radar, and why was it like your choice?
Yeah, so I've always had an affinity for the military since I was a kid, for a few different reasons. My family, I do come from a military family. My dad was Army. He was almost in the Gulf. He got out right before the Gulf War, but he was in the Army through the 80s. And then his dad was Air Force in Vietnam. His uncle was Army in Vietnam. And I had another grandfather that was Army in Vietnam. So just going on back. And so there's the family tie, which always had me interested in it. And then also I'm a big techno geek. Like, I love airplanes and ships and technology. So I've always been into military technology as a kid. I loved Top Gun, loved F-14 Tomcats and that kind of thing, right? So I was always into the technology side of it, which kind of wanted me to one day be in the military to get to play with that stuff firsthand. Yeah. So I'd always tossed the idea around of possibly joining, but the thing is by the time I was a teenager, which would have been, you're talking about like 2000, 2001, that area, just right around 9/11. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any real plans to serve. And a big one was that I had been told, a lot of the people that I knew that had been in the military, they always told me, don't join. They're like, because they're like, you're going to have this one job and it's the only thing you'll ever do for 3 or 4 years and you're going to hate it. Right. This was also during peacetime. This is in the late 90s, early 2000s, post Cold War, where basically there wasn't much to do if you were in the military. Right. And then that all changed with 9/11, which happened when I was 16. And all of a sudden, if you were going to be in the military, you were guaranteed to, be up to something. You were going to get deployed or whatnot. Yeah. So that kicked off, and I was like, if I'm going to be in there, this is a good time to be in. If I'm going to join, I'd like to actually, get to do the job and all that. So that kind of weighed in on it. But it wasn't until I was 19 that I actually decided to go ahead and join the Army. And there were a couple of factors that weighed in on that. But there was, like I said, military family background and stuff kind of pushed me in that direction. But definitely when the wars actually started, I was like, I need to go do this. But having said that, I remember that when I was, I joined in 2004 when I was 19. Mm-hmm. And that was the year of the Bush-Kerry election. That's when, Bush was running for a second term. And I was against the war in Iraq. For no other reason, it's because I was 19 and I just, most 19-year-olds are going to be against wars and stuff. Right. So I wasn't in support of it. And it was the first time I was able to vote. So I went and voted and actually voted for Kerry just because I thought that was the anti-war vote, So
Right.
I voted, and then he lost, and the war was going to continue. So I was like, well, now I got to go be in the war. So I immediately signed up to join the Army after voting against the war. So
Right.
that was my process.
Well, Mike,
And,
you know what, Mike, I talk to a lot of veterans, man. I talk to a lot of young veterans like yourself that came, and I say young veteran, if you came in like after 9/11.
Yeah.
How did you feel, man? Like knowing that, seeing the news reports, seeing the casualty reports, seeing some of the footage and pictures. I find it just overwhelmingly amazing, man, that individuals would still sign up to serve knowing that they would face that.
Yeah, for me that time, well, and like I said, it's on one hand, that happening, the war was happening and the casualties and everything, and it was getting intense. Actually, the thing is, I never, at that time, that never dissuaded me. That actually made it more appealing to me, because I was like, I felt like it was an obligation to do it.
Right.
You didn't have to join the military, but a lot of guys that were my age were joining. A lot of people that were already were getting deployed. They had never planned on that happening, but then a war happens, so all of a sudden they're active. And I was just like, if other people have to go do this and risk their lives, then I got to do it too. I just felt like it was an obligation. And that's probably something that had been ingrained in me through family, since my family had been in the military. So it's like, I just felt like it was a natural obligation to go and do it, especially during wartime. So that kind of, like I said, compelled me. And the idea that I joined Army infantry because I was like, if I'm going to be in the Army or the military for just a few years, because that was my initial plan. I was like, I want to do a job that puts me on the front lines, actually seeing the stuff firsthand. So I was like, this is the time to do it, go to the Middle East. And plus, I also knew too that I was intensely fascinated with what was actually happening, because I did not buy what I saw on TV 90% of the time. And I was like, you know what? I want to go there and see what's happening firsthand. I want to find out for myself.
Right.
So I just thought it'd be, and I was 19, so I had a naive, perspective on a lot of stuff too. I thought it'd be an adventure to go do this. So, it was a blend of things. It was a blend of, I guess you'd say, patriotism and just naive, let's go have an interesting experience and all that put together. And then I had another major motivation too that came out of my childhood that helped push me in that direction.
What was that, man?
I had when I was 8 years old, I was in the film Forrest Gump. I played young Forrest Gump.
Yeah, you did. That's right. I forgot.
Yeah, which was a big thing for me, obviously. Yeah, I played young Forrest Gump when I was 8 years old, which was I shot it in 93, came out in 94. And there's obviously a whole lot of stuff surrounding that. But one of the things from it, I'll go into this later too, get more into this. But that was a big experience as a kid. And it was the only thing I did like that. I did that one movie. That movie ended up just being huge, just this massive thing.
Oh, yeah.
And I did not continue trying to act after that. And, I kind of tried to go back to being a regular kid. And what it did to me as a kid is people only knew me for that from the age of 8 up. I felt like people only knew me for having been the kid in Forrest Gump. And I was always introduced as that as a teenager. And I felt like it was always followed by, what are you doing now? And I never had an answer. Like I wasn't doing anything else. I was in this one movie and that's it. And I felt like that was kind of a letdown. And I always felt like people were expecting more of me as a kid. Mm-hmm. And so that had a lot of effects. But one of them was by the time I was 19, I was like kind of disenchanted with the whole thing and was like, I'm never going to be known for anything else except being in that movie. I was like, so if I'm going to do anything else in my life that can match that or exceed it, being in a real life war is the closest thing. That'll be the one thing I think I can do that'll be, as respectable as something I did when I was 8 years old. So, it's a strange reason that was something that pushed me in there. I think I was trying to prove something to myself and to everybody else. Never said that, but that's what was going through my head.
Well, I think you wound up, playing little Forrest Gump, man. When you joined the Army. That's big, man. Especially the time that you did. And, coming out of Germany, you guys were always deployed coming out of there.
Yeah. We were. When I was in there, it was, I went in 2004, 2005 and Army infantry. And then I was stationed with 1st Armored Division in Germany, and I was mechanized infantry. I was on the Bradleys, following the Abrams tanks around. And, the unit I was in was on a nonstop, rotation in and out of Iraq. So I got my deployment through, I went through January 2006 to March 2007 and, did that time there. And, they were constantly being pushed through. But the thing is by the time I was there, half the guys I was with were on their 3rd deployment. They had been in the invasion, they had been in another deployment since then, and now they're on this one. So it was just, I know a lot of guys that by the time I got out were on their 5th deployments. So there's no telling how many they've been on since then. But it was nonstop. And of course, 1st Armor, that's one of the main key frontline units that they send in if they're going to use tanks and stuff. So,
big armor. How was your time in Germany, man? What'd you think about that?
It was awesome. So Germany, my uncle, my dad's brother, there's another military affiliated person. He has lived in Germany since I think the late 70s. And he still lives there. He's been there, most of his adult life. And he teaches. He works for the DOD, and he teaches he teaches in the American high schools on the bases in Germany. He teaches the kids, the service members, and whatnot.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, so he's been there most of his life. He had always been traveling back and forth and telling us about Germany when I was a kid, so I'd always wanted to go. And when I was 10, Paramount Pictures sent me on a world tour promoting Forrest Gump, and Germany was one of the places I went. Yeah. And so Germany was one of my stops. So I'd already been there as a kid, and I'd been back to visit my uncle. So when it came time to join the Army, one of my key things was that I told them I wanted to pick my duty station, and it had to be Germany. And they were like, okay, well, that can be in your contract. So I made sure I got sent to Germany. And then, Germany was awesome. I loved it. I was technically there for 3 years, but because I spent a year and a half in Iraq, roughly, I was only in Germany for, about a year and a half of that time. But, I dug it. And where I was actually stationed at, was Friedberg, Germany, Ray Barracks, which is about 30 or 45 minutes north of Frankfurt. And, that was the 1st Brigade of 1st Armored Division. That was their home post. But Ray Barracks, Friedberg, it's a very, very small post. It was a small post. It's been closed now because when they shut down and consolidated the bases in Germany years ago, Friedberg and Ray Barracks was one of the places that got closed. Right. But this was actually where Elvis was stationed while he was in the Army as well. So
how about
Ray
that?
Barracks is known as, it's Elvis's home station, which was funny because you got the whole Elvis Forrest Gump thing, and then I ended up being stationed at the same place that he was too. And I'm actually from where he's from. I'm from near the town he was born in. And, he lived in Memphis, which is where I was born. He actually dated my aunt one time. So I've got all these crazy Elvis connections going on throughout my life.
Hey, let me ask you this, man. I was a first sergeant, company first sergeant. Did your first sergeant or your company commander ever have you come in and be like, all right, Humphreys, go ahead and give us some lines? They ever do that to you? Just have you do some lines or anything like that?
They never did, man. They actually, when I joined, I was like, this is going to be a doozy to get in there. And once they find out about the Forrest Gump thing, it's just going to be, I was like, this is going to consume my entire military service as people, ragging on me about having been in Forrest Gump. Didn't turn out that way. It wasn't quite that bad. When I joined, I didn't tell anybody who I was, obviously. And it was 3 weeks or so into basic training before somebody recognized me and then found out. And the drill, in basic, where it should have been the worst, the drill sergeants never treated me any better or worse than anybody else, right? It was, they already chew you up anyway, so it didn't really make any difference. And it's funny because, too, from being in there, that they already call people Gump anyways. That's like a common, like sneer they do. So they're already yelling Gump all the time. I was like looking over my shoulder, like, oh, do they know who I am? But they're just calling everybody Gump, right? So it just kind of like played into the exchanges that go on. And then when I was actually with a unit, my first sergeants, platoon sergeants and all that, they made a lot of jokes about it, but they never like really just called me out on it. So
man, you know what it sounds like, just from talking to you, man, just like the little bit we have, man, you're a very friendly person, very fun to talk to. I could just imagine like getting in there and them almost be like, we're going to do this a little bit, but this guy's ours. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And just brought you in. So
yeah, they were really cool about it. I think they respected. I mean, I feel like most of my NCOs and officers and stuff, I don't think they I feel like they didn't want it to get blown out of proportion, for obvious reasons. They didn't want everybody to be focused on that. And also, I don't think they wanted me to fit in, and, be able to be a good soldier and all that stuff. So as long as I was being a good soldier, they never pressed me on that stuff, or embarrassed me or anything like that. But it, it had its effects. It was late in the Army when I was getting out is when I started going around and doing like interviews and stuff for the Army. That was the only time that the Army actually like used me to kind of promote themselves a little bit, which was fine because I was getting out anyways. And, but it did have a couple effects there. I think there were a couple of jobs that I got assigned specifically because of who I was. Like there was, at one point I was tasked to a job that's typically reserved for E5 when I was still only an E3. And I'm like, I haven't done anything to get this position. I'm like, oh, they just want to be able to say that little Forrest Gump's their driver, That's what it was. And so I actually ended up, I was, infantry, I was with the line platoon when I got to Germany initially, and that's who I was with going into Iraq. But then after I'd been in Iraq for a couple of months, the battalion commander needed a new driver. And of course, they found out who I was and was like, there he is. That's my driver. So I ended up being the BC's driver for the rest of my time in Iraq, his personal security detachment, which I was kind of mad about. I was like, well, this kind of screwed me over because I wanted to be in a line platoon, Mm-hmm. But my battalion commander happened to be one of those guys that he wanted to be outside of the wire every second of every day, instead of in the top. So I ended up pretty much doing what line platoon guys do anyways. So it didn't hurt me too much as far as getting the experience.
Who was your battalion commander?
Thomas C. Graves. He was lieutenant colonel, and last time I talked to him, it's been several years, but he was full bird colonel as of 2011, 2012, and he was a deputy commander in Korea with 2nd Infantry, and that was years ago. I don't know if he's still in, and I don't know what rank he is now, but I would imagine he's probably still in, and he may have made, brigadier general at this point. So, but he was a cool guy. And this guy too, he loved to run, which everybody else hated. I mean, I'm obviously a runner, you've seen that in the movie. So I've got the natural running skill. So PT and running never bothered me because I was good at it. But our battalion commander loved to run, loved to do these, 7, 8, 9, 10 mile runs in Germany. Mm-hmm. And when he went on his leave in Iraq, he and his wife went to Greece and ran in the actual marathon between Athens and Marathon, Greece.
Wow.
And he came in 12th worldwide, I think is right. So
on mid-tour leave, went and ran a marathon.
Yeah, on his leave went and ran a marathon, and I think placed 12th worldwide. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So that's pretty cool.
Sometimes you got to keep the suck going, man, even when you're on leave.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Well, that thing. Yeah, I don't run anymore for fun, but if you're going to do a marathon, do it somewhere like that. Do it in a place like Greece. Where you're going to get this view the whole time, and that's how I feel about around here. Like I don't run races, I don't run marathons and stuff, but I've been meaning to do a marathon or half marathon in Portland just because it's so beautiful around here. It'd be fun to just, get a view of the city doing that.
Yeah. If you ever decide to do that, man, make sure you reach out there and get some veterans coming in there with you.
Oh yeah.
That'd be a good time, man. That'd be a good time.
I need to do it. But and this goes into the whole veteran thing. This is a common experience. I'm not physically disabled in any way from my time in the military. I never really got hurt or anything. However, my knees are killing me. And I think that's the case for everybody that was ever in the infantry, because you destroy the cartilage in your knees by jumping on and off of Bradleys on the concrete all day long. Mm-hmm. So I'm 34 now, and I've gotten to where like I can still run. Like I don't run right now, but I can just go out and run 13 miles, no problem. But my knees are just like, they grind, even when I'm just walking around every day. And been reading more and more that it's just as healthy to walk as run. So I pretty much just relegated myself to walking these days.
Yeah, I walk my dog a couple of times a day, and then I walked all my classes. I very rarely drive my Jeep. So
yeah, that's the same here in Portland. I'm like, that's one thing I love about the city is that I try to walk everywhere I can instead of driving. So, and everybody needs to walk as much as they can, especially Americans.
Now, hey man, as far as when you got out, as far as like the VA, do the VA know about your knees? Have you gone in there and just had them document that stuff?
Yeah, I think so. I mentioned it one time. They told me some, courses of action that could be taken on it, but they required me following up on things that I did not follow up on yet, because it's not that big of an issue. Like my knees do have something up with them, but it's not hindering me from doing anything that I do. Right. It's not like a constant chronic pain or anything. So I haven't really addressed it too much just yet, but I'm sure it's the same case with everybody else that served, I would think.
Yeah. What I was going to say is make sure you go in there and get it documented, because, if 15, 20 years down the road, they're really giving you problems, and you go back in and you say, hey, I was in the infantry and my knees hurt. They're going to be like, man, that was 20 years ago, bro. Mm-hmm. If you get in there now, go in there and get it documented. So later on, they've already got it. Hey, this is service connected. Let's take care of this. Let's take care of old Gump.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, that's true. You do need to get that stuff down on paper.
Yeah.
The VA does their job. I totally respect everything they do, but it is a half you situation. Like, you need to stay on top of it as much as they do with anything you're doing with them. They've just got a lot of stuff they're dealing with. So it's a relatively small organization with a lot of people it's got to deal with. So,
yeah. Where were you at during Iraq, man?
I was in Anbar Province, which everyone's heard of if they know anything about the Iraq War. And that was Ramadi is the center of Anbar. And I was in Hit, which is Hit's west of Ramadi. It's probably the last major town going west into the desert in Anbar Province. Mm-hmm. And at that time in Iraq, so that was in 2006, that what had happened at that point in the war was that, we invaded in 2003, and there was a short period of time where things were relatively quelled. And then you had Al-Qaeda and the other insurgent groups had started to spring up and get really active by 2004. And as everybody knows, there was that initial battle in Fallujah, which is outside of Baghdad, in 2004. And between 2004 and 2006, our military operations slowly pushed the insurgent forces west. So it pushed them from Baghdad to Fallujah, pushed them to Ramadi. And then by the time I was there, they had all been kind of crunched into Anbar Province in the Hit Ramadi region. So that was the focus of all that Al-Qaeda in Iraq activity. Right. And so that's what I was there. I was there during that 2006 flare up of violence and everything. I was leaving right as the surge was technically starting. As I was leaving, they were bringing in a lot more people to try and do something about the situation. But it was intense. I would say that I'm pretty sure that I was in the most as far as counterinsurgency operations go, like long-term operations, I was probably in the most intense part of the war during the most intense time to be there, in the most intense place to be in.
Right. So, a lot of IEDs down there in your AO.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. There was probably a 6-month period where we had, a dozen IEDs per day that went off, not counting the ones that we were finding and disarming. And then just, had those every day. We had ambushes every day, snipers every day, just nonstop, it was just sporadic. It was just all day long. Every few hours, somebody would shoot at somebody somewhere, and some bomb would go off somewhere, and it would just went on like that nonstop for months and months on end.
Can you remember back that far, man, to how, just how how you felt, just being out there, man, just knowing that, at the beginning you were like, hey, the war is wrong, but now you're in it. You're dedicated to it. You're there. How are you feeling now?
Well, I'd go, and on the war is wrong thing too. I'm going to say too about that like, I'm a big history buff. I'm pretty well read as far as history and international relations go. That's what I majored in college was international relations.
Yep.
And I knew a fair bit about it, even though I was 19, about Iraq-U.S. relations and everything. So my perspective on the war, as far as it being right or wrong, was not like a moral, is it morally right, morally wrong? It was more, does it make strategic sense or not?
Right.
And at 19, I was like, I don't see the strategic sense in doing this. This doesn't seem like it's going to work out in a technical sense. So, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go for that. And it was going anyway. So which is why I said, I was just like, well, if it's going to happen, I got to be in it.
Right.
So, but, and that's the same view I've got on it now. Everything, I kind of look at things from a realist perspective, just does it make sense or not, in a logical sense. But being there, yeah, the training and conditioning that we received before going obviously helped immensely. I think that you go into your infantry training and you are conditioned to cope and survive in that situation, to keep a cool head, to not freak out. And I think that training was very effective because I got there and I just remember it's a weird, surreal. It's kind of surreal. Like my memories from being there, I remember that I was very calm most of the time. I was never really scared of anything. And I remember enjoying my time around my fellow soldiers, conversations and just hanging out with people and stuff, in our downtime. Or even when we were on downtime, when we were out doing missions and stuff, just the camaraderie. And, I just remember going up on the roof of buildings and looking around and seeing the sunset in the desert. And I'm like, I'm in the cradle of civilization, like I was just, enamored with where I was, like the fact that I'm in the middle of like, this is the Fertile Crescent. This is where human civilization comes from. I was just amazed to be where I was, despite the fact that there was a war going on. So right. I just remember soaking in almost like the spiritual essence of being there. And then that's coupled with the fact that I'm in a war and I just try to keep a cool head. Like I accepted at some point early on when I got there, I stopped thinking about getting killed because I was like, it's just a roll of the dice, if you're going to hit an ID or not. So there's really no point in worrying about it. So I just stopped worrying about it after about day 3. And just didn't think about it again after that. So, it just became a job. I treated it as a job and tried to do the best job I could the whole time I was there. How do
you feel about your service now? Looking back across the whole landscape, deployments.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel?
It's actually, hell, it's probably the most significant part of my life. It's strange that the thing actually, my time in Iraq and in the military holds more significance to me than anything I've ever done, including being in the movie as a kid. It just is the most profound thing I've ever done with myself. And I'm still crunching all the data, everything that I learned, whatever I learned there, I'm still learning it, I'm still in the learning process. And a lot of that too is, I think, part of your coping and being in a war zone is you have to learn to just, trauma, right? Whenever something that would normally be traumatic happens, you have to, you got to keep calm. And I think you have to kind of just like, shut that trauma away so you can do your job. So a lot of important experiences I had there, I don't think about them and don't remember them now because I like shut them off and they're slowly coming back to me. So it's like, it's like I have a hard time, like I don't have my head fully wrapped around what my experience was or what it meant or how I feel about everything, but I'm glad that I did it. I feel like I was a part of history and all that, history in the making. And it's And then the people I was there with, some of the best people I ever met were people I met while I was there. And I don't know, it's a strange experience. And I would have stayed in too. I was 23 when I was getting out of the Army, and I was gung-ho about getting out because I was 23. I was like, I'm going to get out and go to school and do everything that a 23-year-old does, but now I look back and realize that I would have probably liked to have just stayed in a little bit longer.
Yeah.
So, but I probably would have enjoyed it. I had fun with it, as far as not the war necessarily, but being in the Army in general was fun.
Yeah.
So I just think it was cool. I think it was definitely would have been a good career choice too if I'd done it long term. That's just not the way I ended up going.
Yeah. Mike, it's pretty cool that you talk about like the not being able to like really, get your head completely around, your service. I find myself in the same boat, man. And I use a lot of the psychology that I go through and then the philosophy to try to find that. But I think that's one of the sticking points that a lot of veterans have. I'm not going to say it's a problem. It's just a sticking point where it's like, it's a feeling, and I really need to figure out what this is, and kind of and put it all together, because it's it's part of their saga. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like you're coming on here and kind of cleaning it up a little bit for yourself by talking about it.
Yes.
And it's that narrative. It's personal, it's a personal narrative. And I think we all need to find that just so we can get our feet on the ground and start moving forward again.
Yes, that's right. And that's what I would say with myself, that as far as this applies to my military service, my time in Iraq, it applies to me being in that movie as a kid. My entire life in general is that I am literally, I don't have the answers to most questions. I am still learning everything right now as I go.
Yeah.
So I'm in a learning process, and it's like some things that I talk about, like right now, some of the things I'm talking about, I'm literally pondering them for the first time as I bring them up. Mm-hmm. So it's like everything's a work in progress for me as far as, how I feel about stuff. And I think that's probably the case for a lot of people as far as military time goes, especially if they were in Iraq or Afghanistan. They're probably still trying to figure out exactly how they feel about it and what it means to them even now, 10, 15 years later.
Yeah.
It's just so I don't know, the whole thing, it's just kind of a mind-boggling thing, like I look back on being in Iraq and I'm just like, I can't believe I actually was there and had anything to do with that. Yeah. I don't feel like, objectively, I'm like somebody who's been in a war and who's like a combat vet and actually done all that stuff. I imagine them being a certain way, but then I'm not like that. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm a person that did that. I just don't, I would not look at myself and be like, oh, that guy's a combat veteran. I don't feel like I'm a combat veteran, even though I am. So I'm not really sure what it did to me, or like where I fit into the grand scheme of things there.
Yeah.
But it's a necessity. And that's the thing too. I think part of the sacrifice, there's a lot of sacrifices that go into going and being in a war for your country and all that stuff. And one of them is that you're probably left with questions the rest of your life that are never going to get answered. And that's it. There's the physical sacrifice and the time and possibly losing your life. But if you do survive, there are psychological changes that happen to you that you don't understand for a long time. And even when you become cognizant of them, you don't really know what they mean. Like that's the more subtle stuff, that goes on with people. And I'm in the midst of that myself. Like I've literally, I pretty much just shrugged off my time in Iraq after I left the Army and was like, well, did that, done, into that story. And never really thought about it much after that. And definitely never thought it had any effect on me. Like, no PTSD, no psychological effects, none of that stuff. It took me about a decade to even begin to consider that I am at all affected by it. And then once I started thinking about it, I was like, man, I'm really affected by it. And then I started talking to other people I'd been there with, because I went about 10 years not talking to anybody I'd been in the military with. Yeah. And after talking to them recently, I'm like, they're all experiencing the exact same thing I am. And they've been talking about it for 10 years. And I'm the asshole who's been like ignoring it all, So like, I'm way behind on this stuff.
You know what, man, you're not the only one. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a lot of veterans, myself included. I'm guilty of it too. Getting out and saying, hey, I'm a combat veteran. Mm-hmm. Whatever life's going to throw at me now, it's nothing compared to what I went through. I got this. But those little ankle biters, man, the little problems out here that just kind of bite your ankles. Next thing you know, they're pulling your pants down and they're laughing at you. And man, that's the thing. It keeps building and building. And then stuff just starts to shoot up out of the ground.
That's exactly right.
And
I think in a lot of, like, I've talked to the guys I was there with, and it is like a lot of us have, the classic PTSD thing. And just speak briefly on it, like when I was getting out of the Army is when people started talking about PTSD. That was a big thing in the news, right?
Yeah.
And it was, the stories I usually heard about it were about like the shell shock kind, where like somebody slams a car door too hard and you jump because you think it's a gunshot, like that kind of thing. I never experienced that. I don't have any anxiety. Like, I'm actually probably more adapted to stressful situations because I was in the Army than most people are. So, I'm not shell shocked. Not only am I not shell shocked, I don't know anybody that I was there with that seems to be affected in that way at all. Like, the thing is everybody that I went into the Army with, we were all raised in the generation of violent video games and movies. So by the time we're in the Army and going to Iraq, we've killed people 1,000 times in virtual reality, right? Mm-hmm. That's not real life, but I got to think that that's had some effect on my generation's ability to go to a war zone and not be like immediately traumatized by it,
Right.
And so we got there and it just didn't seem to affect anybody that much. And then when everybody got out, nobody seemed to be affected. They're just like, okay, we did our thing, we're done. So I was like, if PTSD exists, I don't know where it exists. I don't know who it exists with, but it's nobody I know. So I just went years not even thinking about it. And then anyways, to get to the point, I realized recently that like there's this more subtle thing that's going on with me that's been going on for years where I was changed. I'm different. I don't feel right. I talk to these other guys. They don't feel right either, right? All they know is that something doesn't feel right, and it's never felt right since the first day they came back. And I have built a wall for a decade and put all of those questions and uncertainties on the other side of that wall and just completely ignored it, right? And eventually that wall starts to crack and crumble and all that stuff, and then it becomes like a tidal wave of guilt, that comes down on you. And I think that is what a lot of people deal with. And also to the fact that, like we were saying about not going out and saying I'm a combat veteran and talking about these things, I'm terrified of being a cliche, right? And part of that comes from what I did as a kid when I was in Forrest Gump. Mm-hmm. There's this cliche about child actors getting all fucked up after they're in movies and turning into like screw ups and everything and being on drugs and going crazy, right?
Right.
There's a reason for that cliche. We've seen it happen many times with kids in Hollywood, and Hollywood's not the best environment for a child to be raised in, obviously. So there's a reason that happens to these kids. And the truth is that after I was in that movie, even though that was the one movie I was in, I kind of did go a little crazy and get into drugs and partying and all that stuff as a kid. And in a way, I kind of fell into the cliche of like the child actor. Mm-hmm. And so having had that happen, I'm now terrified of being like, well, now I don't want to be the cliche messed up combat vet, Like, I just don't want to admit to being any of these things because I'm like, it's just a stereotype and I don't want to just be the stereotype. But that's what I am, like it or not.
What have you done to address these, man? To minimize the effect, the outward effect, help you to get down the road easier.
Oh, my years since I've been out of the military, that's the thing. I have not done anything to really address any issues I was having. Like I said, I just kind of ignored that they were there. Rather, they were just affecting me, negatively without me doing anything about it or without me acknowledging that that's where it was coming from. And, honestly, see, I'm 34 now. In terms of where I am in my life, I'm where I would imagine a 24-year-old being. Like, I just finished college a little over a year ago. I'm kind of in my first post-college job. I would like to think that 34 is the new 24, so right. Maybe it's okay. And especially with the whole post-recession millennial thing, a lot of people move back in with their parents and all that crap. So maybe it's not that much different for me, but I'm kind of where a 24-year-old would be right now. And one reason for that is that basically my entire 20s. I got out of the Army at 23, and up until the past couple of years, that period of time, I basically was at a standstill, not doing anything with my life. And that's because I had let myself get drugged down after the military to where I was just had no ambition and wasn't doing anything. And I didn't realize I was depressed, didn't realize how I was like feeling, and didn't realize that some of that was coming from having been in the military. Some of that was coming from my experiences as a kid. But I just let all that stuff pull me down to where I just became completely complacent and wasn't doing anything about it at all, you know. Right. Meanwhile, I'm like, you know, I started drinking and stuff, started trying drugs and everything there at one point. So, and that just added to that downward spiral of not going anywhere for a while. So I kind of let my 20s get away from me. And then, you know, once I got into my early 30s, I was like, all right, I need to start like doing something. Right. So it's only been recently that I've, you know, like I said, finished college, moved out here to Portland. I've started like acting again or trying to act again. But as far as addressing these issues from the military, I just went to the VA like a year ago for the first time and was like, hey, I was in Iraq. I might have PTSD or something like that. I don't know, you know, and just started talking to them about that stuff. So that's just been a very recent thing for me. But it's put me in contact with people who have been dealing with this the whole time, you know.
Yeah, absolutely,
I've gone into these group sessions, you know, where I listen to other people talk that had been in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I would say that a lot of the guys I see at the VA who are at treatment seem to be ones who are really badly affected by it. You know, they do have shell shock and they've had more profound drug problems and alcohol problems and stuff. But it's good to be around them because that's like, those are the ones that are really hurting the most, you know? Right. And at the same time, I'll talk to the people I was there with. Like I said, most of the guys I served with have not been drastically affected, yet they have. So I talked to them and I'm like, you know, it's like, they're like, what have you been doing for 10 years? And I was like, well, you know, it took me 10 years to finish my 4 years of college. Meanwhile, I was like doing pills the whole time. And that's been pretty much the story for 10 years, you know? Yeah. And they're like, you know what? Same here. And they got out of it. They finished school. They quit doing drugs and all that stuff. So we eventually move on. But I'm like, a lot of people have been going through that same experience, you know?
I think you're right.
Downhill.
I think you're right, man. There is a handful of veterans, you know, and it's almost like you finish up and you're like, what next? That was the highlight. It doesn't get any better than that. And like you look around and it's like all the stuff's got the volume turned down, man. And and you don't even really know where you fit. Now let me ask you this, Mike, how has things changed now that you've been in contact with veterans that you served with and you can talk to? Has things changed for you?
Yeah, they have. I mean, again, like I am in the process of learning everything as I go. I'm still learning everything as I go. And like I said, if I don't know something, then I'm readily admit I don't know something. Like if I don't have all the information that I need on a particular topic to really make a decision, then I just don't have it. I'll just refrain from having an opinion on it. So I've just been trying to stay in communication with people and hear what their daily experiences are, to try and get a better understanding of what the big picture is, right? And what's going on with everyone and what the common issue is. And like, there's a thing that one of the guys I was there with said, he was like, what it is, as far as what happened to us, is that if you're a civilian in America and you grow up and live here your whole life, and this is pretty much all you ever know, you get to live inside of and enjoy the bubble that is, you know, our civilization, like you get to live inside a set of rules and society and everything that's put together and held together. Or there's a sense of security, right? Right. Yeah. If you leave it and you go to a war zone and you go to a country that's being torn apart and all that stuff, once you come back, you realize that all of this stuff's just like illusory. It's not real, you know, like it's there, but like it's all just, you realize what's actually going on in the real world all the time. You get changed. It changes you and you can never change back. Or rather, how did he put it? He said that we left and we were changed and we came back to a world that has not changed. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But we're different and everybody else is the same. And we can never fit back in, you know, like what you learn there, you can't unlearn. You can't forget it. And I find that I can't, you know, oh man, there's so many things that are going on in the world here that seem so just meaningless and petty to me that people take so seriously. Because I've been in a war and I'm like, this stuff isn't even that big of a deal, and you guys are being hysterical over it.
Right.
Like, and that actually makes it worse too, because having been to a war and having been to a country like Iraq, where you have society has torn itself apart with sectarian violence and political ideologies and whatnot, and then I'm back here in this country where I'm from, and I'm seeing people more and more get at each other's throats over domestic politics, and I'm like, I know where this goes in the long run. Like, I've seen it.
Yep.
So like, you people need to be a little more careful about how you're behaving with each other.
Yep.
And it's a behavior thing, like as far as when it comes to like politics these days, I do not look at people's beliefs. I look at their behavior. Right.
Yeah.
And the thing is when you look at the most extreme liberals and conservatives, it doesn't matter if they're liberal or conservative. They behave the same. They both behave hysterically. And so there's really no distinguishing between them, even though they're at each other's throats. They're like, you're all in this category of crazy people, no matter what your ideology is, and then there's everybody else who's being pretty level-headed, but isn't getting heard because they're being level-headed.
Right.
So the only people you're going to hear on the news anyways are the ones that make the most noise and have the most nonsensical take on everything, because that's the way it works.
Well, Mike, Mike, being yourself being a student of history, I love history, man. And when I look back, we talk quite a bit about, on the podcast about the community of veterans that used to exist. We came back from service, granted it was World War I, World War II, came back to communities and dove into them, raised families, started jobs, had careers, built and stabilized, the communities that we know of today. And we don't have a lot of that. And I think, looking, I'm just going to use you as an example, but there's tons of other veterans that I've talked to that have gone 10, 15, 20 years. And, they put their ruck away, but somebody pulled their rucksack out and set it on the porch one day, and all of a sudden it all comes back at once. I think our, a big part of our mental health and, being able to, continue our philosophy of ourself with war, with our service connected to it. We've got to talk to each other, because you can't put together, trauma, moral injury, 12 months of sustained, dynamic, operations. You can't figure that out on your own. You don't have the skills. You didn't know what it was beforehand. And if you're ever going to talk about it, you have to talk to somebody that has a different opinion, because they saw it from a different angle.
That's right.
Which may connect some dots to help you, put it together better, for your story, because every veteran's story is different, right? So,
yep. And the guys I was there with, they always remember things that I don't remember, there's really important things. I'm like, how in the hell did I forget about that? But I think it's because I just put things away because I don't want to remember something else associated with them,
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's such a huge story there that I'm like, now I remember why I'm affected by it, but I forgot about that,
Yeah.
And I just, the whole other thing too, you go there and you have casualties and stuff. Obviously I had a lot of friends get killed and whatnot. And I feel like on any day that somebody got hurt, I tend to not think about it, which means I forget everything else that happened that day too, good or bad. So it's like, I in a way I've glossed over the whole experience, and I'm just slowly letting it trickle back in.
Well, man, I'll tell you what, we are, I'm here for you, man. If you want to talk about it anytime, you give me a call. You got my number.
Oh, absolutely.
Man, I'm glad you're putting it together now. Because man,
I'm working on it, and I'd like to, like I said, I'm learning as I go and figuring this stuff out. But I also the fact that I ignored my own issues for so long, now I'm starting to address them, and I'm talking to other people about those experiences. And the thing is one reason I feel like an ass is not just because like I said, I'm way behind on this. Other people have been dealing with this for a long time, and I'm just now catching up. But also, as far as the guys I was there with, guys and girls, everybody I was there with most people don't have the platform I have to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
There's only a handful of, like I said, I haven't, really done any serious acting in a long time. I just did that movie as a kid, and it's just been recently that I've, here in Portland, I've been doing acting classes and doing theater and stuff and trying to get back into it slowly. And ideally, I will hopefully show up in another movie in the next year or two.
Heck yeah.
But, as far as that stuff goes, there's only a handful of people in Hollywood. Obviously, Hollywood's a giant platform, There's only a handful of people in Hollywood who are former service members. There's a few of them. None of them, as far as I know, there's not a single Iraq or Afghanistan combat vet who is a successful, well-known actor.
Not yet. You're right.
You got Adam Driver, for example, that plays Kylo Ren and all that in Star Wars. He's an ex-Marine, but he never deployed, which is fine. Not holding that against him. It's just that I've listened to him. He's one of the few people I've listened to. I respect him a lot as an actor and everything and as a Marine, but I've heard him talk about, people ask him all the time in interviews, like, how did your experience in the Marine Corps playing you being an actor? And he's like, it was immensely helpful. Everything that I learned there helped me have the discipline to be a better actor, and it all makes sense. But he doesn't have the firsthand experience of combat and being in a war.
Right.
I haven't ever heard anybody in Hollywood talk about that from firsthand experience. So I feel like I'm kind of in a unique position as far as a platform to convey these experiences in that world, whereas all the people I was there with don't have this platform, and I have not been using it. I have just been completely complacent, not done anything that I could have been doing this entire time. And that's part of my wall of guilt.
What are you going to do now, man? What's, I want to, the path is slowly materializing in front of me, but like, for starters, I should be out there. What I'm doing right now, I should be out there talking to the public about the collective experience and consciousness of combat vets, and what is going on with people, what we're feeling and how we're fitting into this, how we're relating to everybody else, because, like I said, I think that, I've got if nothing else, a small platform to be talking about that, but I would like to learn what I can from other vets and then convey it to the rest of the world as best as I can. And especially as pertains to mental health and stuff, mental health is the big thing. Yeah.
That's a huge thing in the veteran population, and also a huge thing just in my generation in general. It's kind of getting messy to be a 20 or 30 something year old person now, because in a way the world's getting a little more insecure in terms of like employment and the economy and all that stuff. Things are changing rapidly. And, I am a product of the time I grew up in. Like I majored in international relations in college, because when I got out of the Army, I was like, well, I got to go to college now, but I don't know what to go to college for. So I started school in movie production just because it made sense. I'm like, might as well be a movie producer since I was in a movie.
Right.
I had no real passion for it, right? But after I was in school for about a semester, I watched the movie Spy Game with Robert Redford and Brad Pitt. And I was like, you know what? I want to be in the field of international relations and espionage and all that. So I started studying international relations instead. And that's what I got my degree in. But now that I'm out of college, I'm not pursuing a job in that field, because I realized that my interest in that stuff is based on my childhood, which is the Cold War world, the giant battle between capitalism and communism and spy versus spy and all that stuff. But that's like an antiquated thing now. That's not what's going on in the world. So like, my interest in that stuff doesn't really apply to these days. And if you are a 20 or 30 something year old kid, even if you're not a military vet, if you're just a college kid, it's like knowing what you want to do and where you want to go in the world now is getting harder to figure out, Things are just different now. You were talking about the people coming back from World War I and World War II.
Oh, yeah.
The whole country was invested in World War I and World War II, especially World War II.
Right.
Everybody came back having been in the war. And if you hadn't been in the war, you were at home participating in the war effort. Yeah. And America, as we know it today, was built from that, throughout the 20th century. And then, the Cold War ended, the world economy is changing, right? The U.S. is no longer the top. I mean, we're still the top dog, but we're not the only dog. You got China coming up, you got Russia's coming back, you got India, Brazil, Europe, it's changing radically. And the American dream is still valid, but it's not going to take the same shape as it would have in the past.
Absolutely. Do
Like,
you
it's not.
do you think some of that, Mike, is some of the problems that we have is that, coming up through school, you can remember this. I mean, I'm 46, but I still remember, hey, you graduate, you go to college, you get married, you get a house, you start a family. But it's so much harder. I mean, even statistically, it's so much harder to make those things happen on the timeline that they existed back then.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it almost feels as if like, I'm not on that timeline, and it feels like it's like I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, man, that's exactly, I would say, and this is, like I said, I'm trying to find where I can relate not only to vets, but to kids, they're my age or in their 20s. And like, I don't know. I don't know. I since I'm 34 years old, I have found myself recently thinking, man, I'm like really behind. Like, I'm nowhere on track to having a family or having kids or owning a house or any of that stuff. Like, that's nowhere in my near future, and I don't have any plans for that. And I kind of feel like I should feel wrong about that. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't really have an interest in that yet, because like, I'm not doing what I want to do professionally long term. I'm not making the kind of money I would like to make yet. I'm not doing something I love. I don't know what I want to do with my life. So I'm just not positioned to pursue any of those things. Those things don't interest me yet. I'm still interested in just trying to figure out what I want to do with my life and where I want to be and what passions I have, Yeah. So like, in a way, I think a lot of people, the old idea of doing all that, getting out of college, immediately getting a job, getting married, having kids, doesn't apply to so many people anymore.
Right.
That's not the most attractive pursuit necessarily. And if that is your pursuit, that's fine if that's what you want. But making that happen, yeah, it's different now. You can't just go into college and getting a degree in Dutch literature with $100,000 tuition is not going to necessarily be a good pursuit anymore. It's not going to necessarily pay off.
Right.
Soft degrees. When they say people should be going to school for like technical skills, that's true. Like, not saying you shouldn't go to school for something you love otherwise, but having a skill that you can put to use that'll actually make you some money on a day-to-day basis is a good thing to have.
We're trying to plug veterans in now, man. We've had this push, all last week of jobs that are equal to and ready to hire veterans that that did them in the military. And it's like, you're not losing anything here. It's like, hey, you just finished doing this, we'll hire you right now. Boom. And getting that word out there, because I think there's a lot of doors that are closed, but they only appear closed. They're open. But the veteran may get there while the door is closed, but the door is really open. So we just need to open the door for them so they can go in there and realize it's not a broom closet. It's an actual room that's got some opportunities and potential. So, yeah, man.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. And that is a big thing is getting people, trying to help people get back into something in life that they can do, post-military. And like you said, there's the whole thing of people, they feel like the highlight of their life was their time in the military, and nothing seems interesting afterwards, but like, if you can find a tempo with your life, a routine that you like, then it helps, just a lot of people come to a standstill post-military and don't know what to do next. And that just feeds into itself, negativity wise.
Right.
So, yeah, it is a thing, trying to figure out what to do.
So what we were talking earlier, man, and you were saying that you got offered a speaking tour.
Yeah. So and that's part of like here, I'm like I said, I'm literally learning this stuff as I go, but I'm working to develop this idea as far as I do have a platform, because of my film background that I can use to convey my experiences with the military, and I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that looks like. But one option is like doing college speaking tours,
right?
And doing public speaking. Whether it's a paid gig at a college or just going out and doing it, somewhere for free or whatever. Either way, just trying to convey this stuff. But there's a potential of me doing that in the future. Going to some schools and speaking on mental health. And I've had that idea suggested to me in the context that apparently in the college speaking circuit, there's not, when it comes to mental health, it's a messy issue because they can bring in any number of psychologists or whoever to talk about mental health, but how appealing is that to a group of 18-year-old kids, just that dry medical talk, which is fine. They want somebody who I guess can more relate to kids of that age and are having the same experiences they are having that can speak on these mental health topics. Obviously somebody who's been a combat vet and experienced the whole PTSD thing and whatnot, I guess is in a good category for that. Plus, my child actor and the effects on me of that stuff too. It all plays together,
Well, I think it's kind of cool, man, that you can, I think everyone's watched Forrest Gump. I mean, it's just an amazing movie. I mean, everyone should watch it. That these kids, like, I could get up on a stage and be like, hey, I'm Chris Noel. I served some time in the Army. And they're going to be like, look at this old bastard. But here's the thing. When they look up at you, they actually have a reference that you were a kid. It's like, and it's believable. So you have a historical link to them in some point in time where you can actually jump away from. It's like, hey, I played Forrest Gump and little Forrest Gump. And they're like, oh shit. And you're like, hey, I was also in the Army and I deployed and I was, and I was in Iraq and I went through, some mental health issues and I'm here to paint this picture. I think that's going to be dynamic, man. Spreading the word to, the military knows about it. The veteran community knows about it, but that whole community, that whole fact of being community is that everybody around veterans understands that we're not damaged. We're like everybody else. Our damage it's just a different, it just came from a different place. Everyone else has
a different thing. Like I said, it's not always being damaged, it's having been changed. You are changed and that's the way it is. And so we're now a category of people who are just different than everybody else.
Right.
And then, that's all will play into that. And then, the stuff with my experiences as a kid, having been in that movie and then my teenage years, that radically affected my social situation as a kid. I'd say that you would think that having been in a movie like that, I would have been the most popular kid in school. But in fact, I was like the most alienated kid in school because I could not relate to other people, like it just, I think just because I got immediately separated because of that one experience, but I couldn't find a way to relate to other kids. So I had that whole reclusive, video game playing childhood, where like I was more concerned with fantasy and stuff than I was what was going on in the real world. And, that's part of the whole mental health thing, how you can socialize with other people and everything. So I've got the thing is I've got this whole list of experiences, which are really relevant, but I am still trying to figure out how they all fit together and what context they fit into.
Right.
Like somebody says, hey, go to a college and speak to these kids about mental health. And I'm like, yeah, I've had some mental health experiences, but I don't really know where am I coming from with this? Like, what's my thesis? What's my message here?
Right.
I don't know what my message is because I am learning. It's like I said, I don't have most of the answers. So I'm not really sure what is it I'm trying to tell them, other than I'm experiencing this too. Yeah. Maybe that's enough though, just to say, look, I'm experiencing what you're experiencing. So are all these other people. You're not alone,
I think so, Mike. I think that, I don't think that anybody fully understands. Even, it's more of, hey, this is me. I went through this. A lot of, you can find similarity with me in many ways, but there's definitely a way through it. Through the trauma of young age, working through issues. I mean, a lot of kids are affected by the fact that they are pushed away and they don't have friends. That's tough, man. I couldn't imagine you being, because this is what's crazy, Mike. If you would have showed up, let's say, you did the show at 8, let's say you showed up at 10 o'clock, or at 10 years old and you looked similar to 8, you would have showed up in my town, man, people would have been like, hey, Mike, come stay at our house. Hey, Mike, come stay at my house. And you would have been, but that's kind of the dynamic, man. It's like, it's tough being a kid, especially nowadays. It seems like the bullying. So man, I think your message, putting that together, like through age, having that connection with people, serving, going through combat, and then spending 10 years just putting it together. or trying to understand what it was. And then all of a sudden having this point in your life where you're leaning forward to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's going to resonate with a lot of folks, man. I've got some people that can help you out, man. If you want to talk to Katie Kopp, she was a captain in the Army, combat therapist. Man, she came out to the Korengal Valley, man, to to talk to some of my guys. She does phenomenal work, man. I would like to put you in contact with her just so she can help you put this together. I mean, if you're
absolutely.
If you're going to go out there, man, I'd like to throw as many good veterans in front of you to help you make this happen, man.
Absolutely, yeah, that's all right. That's what I would like to be doing, and also too, on the acting thing, like I did not, after doing that movie as a kid, I just did not pursue acting after that for a number of reasons, but mainly just that that movie was really successful. And then my parents and I were faced with the question of, okay, if we want to keep doing this, we're going to have to move to LA and live this life, Yeah. And as an 8-year-old kid, I was not interested in going to auditions every day because I was an 8-year-old kid. My parents didn't push me on it. So we just stayed right where we were in Mississippi and did not change anything, which is good, probably in the sense that I didn't go down the path of the child star, which could have ended up even worse. Mm-hmm. But just like having been in the Army and been in Iraq and you come back, things are never going to be the same. You're always going to be different than everybody else. Having been in that movie meant that I was always going to be different than everybody else as a kid, So I just had to deal with that. I had to just go with that, and the thing is that I did not try acting again. And it's only been in the past few years I've been like, you know what? I had fun with that as a kid. Why don't I give that a shot again? Mm-hmm. So now that I'm getting back into it, I've actually found that there's not a whole lot of difference between learning acting and therapy. It's almost like a type of therapy, right? Because the way you have to open yourself up to your experiences and emotions to be an actor, I feel like is the same as what you would be doing in terms of therapy for PTSD and your war experiences. So all this is kind of falling together for me. I'm hoping that what I experienced will help me professionally, as far as developing those skills too.
Definitely, man. I hope that, you talk about these, everything that you go through is, changes you. And I think a lot of people can relate to, certain parts of their life. They went through something that changed them and they didn't really take advantage of it or get a chance to understand it.
Right.
You're at the point right now, man, where you've got two parts of your life that you're putting together, and you get a chance to understand this dynamic change in your life. Because you're ready to do that.
Yes.
You weren't ready in the service. You weren't ready at 8 years old to kind of put together this whole process. But now, man, at 34, having good perspective on where you've been, and then wanting to get out there and spread the message, of mental health and just the struggles that veterans go through and how we can get through them. It's going to be amazing, man. It's going to be amazing. I just hope that you get, first off, the first person that gets anything from it. I hope it's you, because that's going to be the power that comes behind your words. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Is that understanding?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would tell everybody too that with that everything. And anything that I've experienced that I would initially say was bad, or any bad experiences that I've had, I feel like I can take those and there is something to gain from them. There is some way to spin it around and use it to my advantage in some way, you know?
Yeah.
Like I would tell everybody that and no matter what has happened to you and how rough it's been, the worst things that have happened can somehow be transformed into a skill or an advantage of some kind. You can use it in some way, to further yourself and your goals.
Yeah.
So I would just say to people just to be positive at all times, no matter what. And that's really all you can do, and I definitely from being in Iraq, the whole thing about you get there and you have to stop worrying about being killed because there's no point in just freaking out about that all day long. Mm-hmm. I would apply that philosophy to life in general. Just don't freak out about everything. Just keep calm, and be positive and just go with it. Do what you can,
Yeah. I like that, man. Good perspective to have. My dad always said that, the world can kill you, but it ain't going to eat you.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's right.
I always kind of took that to heart, man. It's like, and I think I said that I probably scared a couple of soldiers a couple of times, and I told them, I said, hey, you may get killed out here, but they ain't going to eat you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they didn't quite get it, but like, it used to be the thing that, you didn't want anybody to eat you when you were dead, like bears and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That was like the total disrespect of dying was that you were eaten.
Right. You got to be buried.
So it's not, the whole part of that, it's not going to be that bad. But man, it's hard to tell yourself that. I still remember the time I stood there and I was watching, it was in the Corrigal, and I was watching soldiers leave the gate. We were getting ready to go on patrol, and I'm watching these guys, and they're young men, and they're just like little brothers. And I knew the mission was going to be tough, and man, just a tear rolled out of my eye, rolled down my cheek, and I thought, might not make it back from this. And I still remember I wasn't physically shaken. It was just an emotional feel that just kind of went over me, and then it was gone. Then it was gone, and I walked out the gate with everybody else. It's very profound, man. I don't think that people really understand that, and for the people that have done it, I don't know if they've thought about it to that point of just what that means in the terms of, your dedication, not only, to those around you, but, kind of to yourself in a sense. You know what I'm saying? That you understand it and you're good with it, man. It is earth shattering when that happens to you. And I just, I hope and pray that veterans that have gone through that haven't figured it out, that they do, that they get a chance to embrace that and get over the feeling of it, because they don't have to do it now. They don't have to do it now. They did it then, because it hurts. It hurts the progress that we can make out here as individual veterans, not as a community. As one veteran goes down, it affects us. But man, it sure tears up individual veterans, and I hate to see it.
Well, and and I think too, this is something that's happened with me, and it's probably with everybody else, is that I, in the process of being conditioned to be in Iraq and all that, and be in combat, you condition yourself to, the training conditions you, and you condition yourself to not be emotionally affected by things, because it's kind of a necessity to get through the day and do your job and be effective.
Yeah.
And then the thing is that when you come back to the regular world, that conditioning is still in place. And so I found when I came back that I was not being emotionally affected by things the way I should have been, as a regular person. Like I was like, I'm not feeling anything anymore, and it's because I learned to not feel things there. And now how do I let go of that and get back into the regular world? So I think there's a combination of veterans, probably some of them probably feel too much, and some of them probably feel nothing at all where they should feel something, as a side effect of having done that. I know that's been the case with me. So
do you see where
desensitized, desensitization?
Yeah. Do you see where maybe that might have affected like family relations or other relationships?
Yeah. Because I came back my decade after the Army, I basically made. I had a couple friends, but I basically had no friends. I didn't go out of my way to make friends, and had virtually none. Kind of kept to myself. Didn't have any successful relationships. Just was not engaged with anybody in any way on any meaningful level.
Yeah.
And took me a long time to be like, well, this is not a good status quo.
Right.
And I didn't feel sad, but I didn't feel happy. Was never angry. Was never anything. Just nothing at all. It was just like a dead feeling. And it took a while for it to start coming back. But then once it starts coming back, that whole wall that I built starts to collapse. And then this whole, like I said, tidal wave of emotions comes pouring in all at once. Yeah. And then you got to deal with that. So it's like walking a line between having no feelings and being hysterical, know?
Now, Mike, do you looking back, man, do you think this is just like the perfect time? I mean, if you had to be like, things work out for a reason, would you say that this is just like perfect timing for you? Yeah, having gone through life and ready to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's right. I think this is a time in my life where things are starting to come together with stuff. I'm starting to get a clearer perspective of what I'm doing. And I do think things work out the way they work out for a reason. Everything is. It could always be worse, and I never either. Whatever regrets I have, I'm like, that could have gone somewhere totally different than where I thought it would have. So
right.
I just got to be happy with what I got.
It seems like you're doing pretty good, man. Like,
it's not too bad.
Yeah.
Like I said, just in the figuring it out phase.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is an important phase, brother. I mean, this is, this is where the good stuff starts coming out. Tons of veterans, man, that put the bottle down, put the drugs away, and started getting their heads straight, and figured out who they were again, and what they stand for. And man, they are burning the veteran community down on the podcast, man. Coming on with rich knowledge, just like you're bringing on, man. Being honest with yourself, honest with other people. War, Sun Tzu said that war was deception. It was all about deception. Out here in veteran land, man, it's not about deception. This place is about, openness. It's about figuring it out because you don't want to waste time. I mean, you wasted 10 years. I wasted a couple of years and I got out. I was doing good things, but I wasn't moving in the direction I needed to move, not to be where I am now. But we have to do those things. And, man, I'm glad you found your way back, man. And you're going to be hard to deal with. It's going to be good. No, it's going to be good, man. Cause you're on fire, man. Like you said, it's like, hey, I just found this stuff out. All of a sudden it came back. So you've got the energy, man, that, like I said, I think the timing is just perfect.
Yeah. I hope so. And I definitely feel like I got the motivation now where I didn't have it before. So
yeah.
It seems to be working in that direction. I just got to do what I can with it. And it'll be a messy process. I'll say to people, like I said, I'm figuring things out as I go. So, I might have one perspective today and another tomorrow, but there's nothing wrong with that.
Hey, so let me ask you this here, off the military and stuff like that, and just kind of looking at what you got going on now. What kind of character do you like to play? Do you know what I'm saying? Like when you think of like your, a movie, what kind of character are you going for, or do you prefer to play?
I'm not even really sure about that yet. My kind of like I'm just. The thing is, I got thrown into that thing as a kid without any experience and just did the part. And then the handful of acting roles that I've had since then, there's been a few other things, but in every case after that, I was requested for and cast because of what I'd done as a kid. So I always came into it without having any formal training.
Right.
And here in the past couple of years, I've been actually taking classes and stuff and studying acting formally. And now that I'm doing that, I've had to ask that question, like, what am I going for as far as roles? And I don't know yet, except that I, by default, am inclined to do whatever the exact opposite of my personality is, just as, like as exposure therapy. Like I want to try and play the opposite of myself just so I can bring these emotions out that I'm usually bottling up, Yeah. And hopefully learn more about myself in the process. But, I'd be down with I don't know, probably drama stuff, inclined towards drama, possibly thrillers. I mean, in an ideal world, one day I'll be doing something like Bourne Identity, some kind of cool spy thriller action thing. Something like that would be awesome, But at the same time, I feel like I'd like to be in more subtle stuff like dramas and develop my drama skills. Because I'm not a dramatic person. That's the thing. I am zero drama. So like I need to play dramatic characters or at least try that at first.
Mike, I can
bring that out.
What I'm thinking, man, is, what kind of character can you put together once you figure out the saga of Mike Humphreys and somebody calls you up and say, hey, we need an Iraq veteran that's 35 years old. And you come in and say, I am that veteran. I am the one that you need. And here it comes because I know it. It's me.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd say I can play one of those strong but damaged people. I guess that's pretty vague. And
I do it all the time,
dark,
man.
But strong and damaged. I would say that would be the direction I would go.
Oh man, that's funny.
Strong, damaged, and positive. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, hey man, we're getting up around an hour and a half. Man, I want to thank you for coming on, brother.
Oh yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah, I had fun. This has been good. Like I said, this is I'm literally this process here, just having this conversation is helping me wrap my head around what I've learned through all these things, so that I can put it into context in other places.
Well, hey man, if you're sitting around, the episode comes out, you're listening to it, and if you have any more ideas, man, or anything that comes up in your head that can help veterans, you want to talk about some of the stuff that you're understanding. You want to come talk about some of the speaking engagements that you've got or that you've been through. Reach out, man, and we'll get you on here. There's always a mic open for every veteran that wants to come on, especially if the message is strong, man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'm totally down with that. It'd be really, eventually maybe we can, I'd love to get on and talk with some other vets too,
Absolutely.
That's kind of where I'm trying to move anyways, is have conversations with veterans and kind of get their perspectives on things too, to help with mine. I'm just wanting to learn everything I can from everybody else. So that's what I'm doing, is trying to learn what I can from everybody else in the world.
Well, keep listening to the podcast.
I know nothing. What's that?
Yeah, keep listening to the podcast, man, because their veterans are coming on and they're doing just like you are, man. They're opening up, and the thing is, we only know what we know. And the thing is, like if there's a feeling that I'm having and I'm not quite understanding it, but a veteran comes on and like describes it, and it's pinpoint to me, and they turn around and they say, "That's depression." That's how I found out I had depression, man.
I hear you. That's one of those things. I never wanted to call anything I had depression. I was like, I guess it's classic depression. I just didn't want to call it that.
Yeah. But you get that from listening to somebody else, like, give your symptoms. It's like, oh dude, so what did you have? I had veteran. I had the veteran virus. Oh shit. And and then you get over it, and you rise above it.
It is Iraq War syndrome. You had Gulf War syndrome, and now there's Iraq War syndrome or Afghanistan War syndrome. This subtle thing that's going on. So it's like radiation poisoning. You have it for years and you don't know you have it, but it's slowly eating you up the whole time. That's what a lot of people have been experiencing.
I think a lot of it is it's almost like expectations. I grew up with Vietnam movies, man, and anybody that watched like John Wayne movies, I got two uncles, right? And if John Wayne came on on TV, they would stand. You know what I'm saying? It was like they grew up with John Wayne, and he's like he's a pillar, and they do things like he would do. So they don't talk about their feelings, all that kind of stuff. Of course, we have to get away from that, right? Yes. So we have to have a new version of the veteran that's out there. It's like the new way ahead. There has to be a veteran out there that's like, hey, this is the way we do business. This is a different generation. This war was different. We're affected different because we came from a different environment when we went to it. You talked about the video games and a different kind of lifestyle. So yeah, man, we have to paint a current picture and kind of erase this whole idea of like what we think being a veteran is. Yeah. And actually make it real and sustainable.
That's absolutely right. And you're right. Well, yeah, expectations, man. It's all about that. I've been dealing my whole life with the idea of what I thought other people's expectations were, and then trying to base my life around that, which is a mistake, Yeah. And then of course my own expectations of things. So yeah, it needs to be reformed.
Well, hey, Mike, let's get you on here and let's talk about it. Let's reform it. Thank you for, every veteran that comes on here, man, I tell them, if you come on the show once, the podcast owns you. Because the thing is, if you ever hear me say like we here at the podcast, that's you, man. That's every veteran that's come on, every veteran that's out there. This is their show, man. And we'd be honored if you come on and let us know how things are going as you start to figure this out. And as you get out on the road and start talking to people, tell them the story.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely.
Well, hey man, I'm gonna let you close the episode out with the co-host closeout. Thank you for coming on, my friend, and we will talk some more, definitely.
All right. Sounds good to me.
It's all yours, man. You got the last word.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So everybody out there, thanks for listening in to A Heart of a Volunteer. Be sure to share this episode and check back in. And I would say to anybody who is a veteran, combat vet like myself, as I've just been elaborating on, you probably feel different since you've been out of the wars and out of the military. I know that I literally felt different from the first day I came back, but didn't acknowledge that I felt different on that day, and took me years to realize that I'm changed. I'm a changed person. I will never be the same from having been there. And I think that anybody that goes and has those experiences, you'll learn something about yourself and human nature in the world that the civilian world's not going to understand for obvious reasons. But I would say that I know it's rough. It can be difficult, but think about it in terms of you are enlightened. You have experienced enlightenment in a way that nobody else can, because you have been there and seen reality, and you've brought that back home with you. So I think it's up to all of us to try and, if we can, to educate the rest of the world, or educate our world here in what we've learned, and hopefully make it a better place, and especially these days to help people calm down, since everybody's at their throats about every little thing, maybe us who have been through real combat and these traumas can help convince everybody else that it's not worth getting into a fight over every little thing. And yeah, that about covers it.
And now, folks, it's time to say goodnight. We sincerely appreciate your patronage and hope we've succeeded in bringing you an enjoyable evening of entertainment. Please drive home carefully and come back again soon.
Copyright Heart of a Volunteer 2020.